The past is never dead. It is not even past. It sleeps like a snake in the sun, waiting for a shadow to fall, waiting for the right moment to strike again. 6 years had passed. 6 years of fragile peace woven into the fabric of the Montana seasons. Lone Wolf, now chief of his people, watched his son Little Hawk practice with a small bow. The boy had his father's eyes, but his mother's determined spirit. Lizzie, now known to all as she who finds water, stood beside her husband, her heart a calm river. The scars of her past had faded, replaced by the quiet strength of a woman who had found her home. The valley was prosperous, the new spring a constant reminder of the bridge she had built between two worlds. But on the frontier, peace is often just the quiet breath taken before the storm. The arrival came without warning. A lone rider on a fine bay mare, dressed not in the rough garb of a trapper, but in the tailored coat of a gentleman from the east. He rode into the village with an easy confidence that unnerved the warriors. His smile was warm, his eyes a familiar shade of blue. He dismounted before the chief's lodge and removed his hat. "Elizabeth?" he asked, his voice filled with a practiced, theatrical emotion. "My dear niece, I have finally found you." Lizzie froze, the world spinning around her. It was a face she had not seen since childhood, a face she had long believed was lost to memory and time. It was Marcus Kane, her mother's brother. The tribe watched in stunned silence as Lizzie embraced the stranger. Tears she thought had long dried up streamed down her face. Marcus held her, whispering words of comfort, of long years spent searching, of his joy at finding her alive. He spoke of family, of shared memories, of a life she had left behind. Lone Wolf stood stoic, his hand resting on his son's shoulder, his eyes narrowed with a suspicion that was as instinctual as breathing. He did not see a long-lost uncle. He saw a man whose hands were too soft, whose smile did not reach his eyes. He saw a threat wearing the mask of family. That night, Marcus Kane sat by their fire, captivating Little Hawk with tales of bustling cities and incredible inventions. He presented Lizzie with a small, silver locket. "Your mother gave this to me before we parted ways," he said, his voice thick with sentiment. "I have kept it for you all these years." But miles away, in the dark hills that bordered the Cheyenne territory, a different fire burned. Jedediah Thorne stared into the flames, his face a mask of bitter hatred. He had lost his land, his reputation, everything, because of her. A rider emerged from the shadows. "He is in," the rider reported. Thorne smiled, a cruel, cold twisting of his lips. The plan had begun. Marcus Kane seamlessly wove himself into the fabric of the village. He was charming, intelligent, and endlessly curious about the Cheyenne way of life. He praised their craftsmanship, listened intently to the elders' stories, and showed a particular interest in the tribe's legends and sacred places. "Your people have such a rich history," he would say to Lizzie, his eyes gleaming with a scholar's feigned interest. "I wish to understand the beliefs that have given you such strength." But his questions always circled back to one topic: the land itself, its hidden valleys, its unique geological formations. His true purpose began to surface in secret meetings. He sought out Red Hawk, the warrior whose heart still harbored a deep-seated resentment. Marcus found him alone, cleaning his rifle. "A fine weapon," Marcus began, his voice a low murmur. "But one rifle is nothing against an army. I have friends, powerful friends, who believe as you do. They believe this land should belong to its true masters." He spoke of a new future, one where the Cheyenne would have the weapons to drive out every last settler. All he asked for in return was a guide to a place of great spiritual power, a place the old legends called the Valley of Golden Tears. Lizzie found herself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The joy of having family again was intoxicating. Marcus reminded her of a world she had almost forgotten, a world of books and polite conversation. Yet, a small, persistent voice of doubt whispered in her mind. She saw the way his eyes scanned the landscape, not with wonder, but with assessment. She noticed how he subtly tried to turn Little Hawk against his father's primitive ways. "Your son has a brilliant mind," Marcus told her. "He deserves more than this life of dirt and superstition. He could be a great man in our world." The tension between Lizzie and Lone Wolf grew. "He is my family," she would argue, defending Marcus. "You do not trust him because he is a white man. Lone Wolf's response was always the same, quiet and firm. I do not trust his spirit, it is hollow. He looks at our home, but he does not see a home. He sees something to be taken. His words were a wedge between them, the first serious disagreement of their marriage. While they argued, Red Hawk, his old hatred rekindled by Marcus's promises, agreed to lead the stranger into the sacred territories, betraying the trust of his chief and his people. The Valley of Golden Tears was not a place of gold, but a place of healing. It was a secluded canyon where for generations the Cheyenne had gathered a rare yellow clay, prized for its medicinal properties. It was sacred ground, forbidden to outsiders. Red Hawk knew this. Yet, the poison of Marcus Kane's words had infected him. He saw a chance to gain the power he felt he deserved, the power to protect his people in the only way he understood, through war. He agreed to guide Marcus, believing he was serving a greater good, blind to the fact that he was merely a pawn in a much larger, more sinister game. Meanwhile, Jedediah Thorne made his move. He operated from the shadows, using the considerable fortune he had left to fund his revenge. He sent a wagon loaded with new rifles and ammunition to a secret rendezvous point, a gift for Red Hawk's growing faction of disgruntled warriors. Thorne's instructions, delivered by a messenger, were simple. Create chaos, divide the tribe. When they are weak and fighting amongst themselves, we will strike. The gold will be ours, and the land will be cleansed of these heathens for good. He had learned from his past failure. He would not use the army this time. He would use the Cheyenne to destroy themselves. Little Hawk, whose Cheyenne name was Cheyenne, found himself torn. He loved and respected his father, but his uncle's tales of the outside world fascinated him. Marcus showed him a picture book of a grand city, with buildings that touched the sky and carriages that moved without horses. This is your birthright too, my boy, Marcus would say. Your mother's world. You do not have to choose. You can have both. He planted seeds of ambition and discontent in the boy's mind, making him question his father's traditional ways and view the simple life of the tribe as a cage. One evening, Cheyenne challenged his father. Why must we live like this? Uncle Marcus says there is a better world, a world with schools and real houses. Lone Wolf's heart grew heavy. He saw the shadow of the white world falling over his son. A house is just a box, my son, he answered patiently. A true home is the land, the sky, the people. Their world offers comfort for the body, but our world offers strength for the spirit, the choice of which to value more will one day be yours. But the boy, frustrated, did not understand. The first crack in the family's foundation had appeared. The first sign of open dissent came during a council meeting. Red Hawk, emboldened by the secret promise of new weapons, openly challenged Lone Wolf's leadership. Our chief listens to the words of a white woman while our enemies gather at our borders, he declared, his voice ringing with accusation. He speaks of peace when we should be preparing for war. He has grown soft. Several younger warriors murmured in agreement. The poison was working. The tribe, once united, was beginning to fracture along old fault lines of fear and resentment. Lone Wolf faced them with calm authority, but he could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. Lizzie, witnessing this, felt a cold dread. She confronted Marcus. What have you been saying to them? This division, it started when you arrived. Marcus feigned innocence, his face a mask of hurt. My dear Elizabeth, how can you accuse me? I seek only to understand. Perhaps their anger is justified. Perhaps your husband's peaceful ways are seen as a weakness. He masterfully turned her own fears against her, making her wonder if she was the true cause of the tribe's troubles, if her presence had indeed softened the man she loved and endangered his people. A lone rider approached the village, travel-worn and weary. It was Frenchy LeBeau. The old trapper's eyes were grave as he sat with Lone Wolf and Lizzie in the privacy of their lodge. I have seen things that trouble me, he said, his voice low. A man who matches your uncle's description was seen meeting with Jedediah Thorne a month ago in a mining town. And I found a fresh trail, a large party of armed men hiding in the Ghost Canyon. They are not soldiers. They are hard men, the kind who kill for coin. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place, revealing a horrifying picture. The truth hit Lizzie like a physical blow. Her uncle was a lie. Her rediscovered family was a phantom. He was a partner in Thorne's monstrous scheme. The locket, the stories, the shared memories. All of it had been a calculated, cruel performance designed to gain her trust and blind her to his true intentions. The pain of this second betrayal was immense, but it was quickly consumed by a cold, sharp fury. They had not just come for gold, they had come for her family, for her home. They had come to finish what they started 6 years ago. And this time, she would be ready. Lizzie revealed the truth to Lone Wolf. The last vestiges of doubt vanished, replaced by a shared, grim purpose. The time for division was over. Lone Wolf called a secret council with Grey Eagle and the most trusted warriors. He laid out the evidence: Thorne's revenge, Marcus's deception, and the hidden army of hired guns. The threat was not just from outside, but from within, with Red Hawk as the unwitting trigger. They had to act, but a direct confrontation would tear the tribe apart and play directly into Thorne's hands. A new plan was needed, a trap. The plan was born from Lizzie's understanding of her enemy's greed. She would play her part as the trusting niece. She would convince her husband to allow Marcus a visit to the Valley of Golden Tears. But she would lead him not to the sacred canyon but to a different location. A narrow, inescapable box canyon known to the Cheyenne as the place of whispering winds. It was a place where the acoustics were strange, where a whisper could sound like a shout. It would be their stage. They would use Marcus's greed as the bait to lure Thorne and his entire band into the open. To make the ruse believable, Lizzie had to appear to betray her husband's trust. She staged a loud public argument with Lone Wolf, accusing him of being blind to the needs of his people and of disrespecting her family. "My uncle wishes only to see the wonders of this land." "Your pride will be the ruin of us all," she shouted, her performance so convincing that even Singing Bird looked at her with shocked disbelief. Red Hawk, watching from the shadows, saw this as the final proof of her corrupting influence and the justification for his own treacherous actions. That night, Lizzie went to Marcus. "My husband is a fool," she said, her voice filled with feigned bitterness. "But I will not let his pride stand in the way. I will guide you to the valley myself, in secret, at dawn." Marcus's eyes lit up with triumph. The trap was set. As Lizzie lay awake beside her sleeping husband, she felt the terrible weight of their gamble. They were pitting their family's unity and their people's survival against the insatiable greed of two evil men. The coming dawn would bring either salvation or utter destruction. At first light, Lizzie and Marcus rode out of the village. Cheyenne, their son, watched them go, his heart a knot of confusion and hurt. His mother had chosen her white family over his father. Marcus had convinced the boy to create a diversion if anyone followed, preying on his desire to help his mother. As they rode, Marcus could barely contain his excitement. "You have done the right thing, Elizabeth," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Some things are more important than old superstitions." Lizzie simply nodded, her face a cold mask, her mind focused on the dangerous path ahead. Lone Wolf and his warriors had already departed, moving like ghosts through the pre-dawn shadows to take their positions around the place of whispering winds. He had left Frenchy LeBeau with a small party of trusted men to watch over the main camp and to intercept Red Hawk if he tried to make his move. Before leaving, Lone Wolf had spoken to his son. "Your mother is the bravest woman I have ever known. Trust her heart, even when you do not understand her path." The words were a seed of faith planted in the boy's troubled mind. As Lizzie and Marcus neared the box canyon, Marcus pulled out a small mirror and flashed a signal toward the high ridges. He thought she did not see. It was the signal for Thorne and his band to move in. "We are almost there," Marcus said, his greed making him careless. "Soon all our struggles will be over." Lizzie led him into the narrow entrance of the canyon. The towering rock walls seemed to close in around them. The air was still and heavy. "The clay is just ahead, around this bend," she said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. They rounded the bend to find an empty, desolate space. Marcus's face contorted in confusion, then rage. "Where is it? What trick is this?" At that moment, the sound of dozens of riders thundered into the canyon entrance behind them. Jedediah Thorne appeared, a cruel sneer on his face, flanked by a score of the most ruthless-looking men Lizzie had ever seen. "No trick, my dear," Thorne said, his voice dripping with venom. "Just the end of the line. For all of you." He raised his firearm, and his men followed suit, their weapons aimed at the lone woman who had defied him. "You?" Lizzie said, her voice echoing strangely off the canyon walls. She looked not at Marcus, but directly at Thorne. "After all these years, your heart is still a shriveled, hateful thing." Thorne laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "My heart is fine. It will be much better when I see you and these savages begging for mercy." He gestured impatiently at Marcus. "Where is the gold, Cain? We have no time for games." Marcus, his face pale, turned on Lizzie. "Tell them, or I will let them—" His threat was cut short. An arrow hissed through the air, embedding itself in the ground just inches from Thorne's boot. All heads snapped up. The canyon rims, which had been empty moments before, were now lined with the silent, formidable shapes of Cheyenne warriors. Lone Wolf stood on the highest precipice, his bow still raised. They were completely surrounded. The hunters had become the hunted. Thorne's men shifted nervously, their confidence evaporating as they realized the scale of the ambush. Panic began to ripple through their ranks. "It seems you have been misled, Mr. Thorne," Lizzie's amplified voice called down from the rocks. "There is no gold here. There is only justice." Thorne's face turned purple with rage. He turned on Marcus, his partner in deception. "You fool! You led us into a trap!" In his fury, he swung the heavy barrel of his rifle, striking Marcus hard across the head. Marcus crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Thorne then aimed his weapon wildly towards the ridges. "You will not take me," he roared. The Cheyenne responded not with a lethal volley, but with a terrifying display of precision. Arrows flew, not at the men, but around them. They pinned sleeves to the rocky ground, split rifle stocks, and whistled inches past ears. It was a clear, unmistakable message. "We can kill you whenever we choose." Thorne's hired guns, realizing they were hopelessly outmatched, threw down their weapons in surrender. In the confusion, Thorne grabbed Lizzie, holding his firearm to her head. "Call them off," he screamed at Lone Wolf, "or she pays the price." Back at the village, Red Hawk and his followers confronted Frenchy LeBeau. "Stand aside, old man. The tribe needs a real leader, not a chief who hides behind his white wife." Just as he raised his rifle, Cheyenne ran between them. "No!" the boy cried. "My father is not a coward, and my mother is not a traitor. You are the one who is blind, Red Hawk, blinded by old hatred." The conviction in the boy's voice gave Red Hawk a moment of pause. In that moment, he saw not a child, but the spirit of a future chief, and the shame of his own actions began to dawn on him. In the canyon, Lone Wolf began his slow descent, hands raised. "This is between us, Thorne. Let her go." Thorne's eyes were wild. "She took everything. It ends now." As he spoke, one of Thorne's men, who had only pretended to surrender, drew a hidden knife and lunged toward Cheyenne, who had just arrived with Frenchy and now stood at the canyon's edge. Red Hawk, seeing the danger, reacted without thinking. He threw himself in front of the boy, taking the blade in his arm. The wound was deep, but not fatal. His act of sacrifice was instantaneous and absolute. The attack on his son broke Thorne's focus for a split second. He glanced toward the commotion, his grip on Lizzie loosening almost imperceptibly. It was the opening Lone Wolf had been waiting for. He moved with the speed of a striking snake, not to kill, but to disarm. A swift, powerful movement, and the firearm clattered to the rocks. The struggle was brief and decisive. Thorne, no match for the warrior's strength, was subdued and bound. The long, bitter feud was finally over. Red Hawk lay on the ground, clutching his bleeding arm, with Frenchy tending to the wound. He looked at Cheyenne, who stood over him, safe. "I was wrong," Red Hawk said, his voice filled with remorse. "Your mother's heart is stronger than my hate." Cheyenne simply nodded, his eyes filled with a new understanding of courage and sacrifice. The internal battle for the soul of the tribe had been won, not by a show of force, but but by an act of selfless redemption. The aftermath in the canyon was one of quiet, controlled victory. Thorne and his captured men were rounded up, their weapons collected. Marcus Kane, now conscious, was brought before Lone Wolf. He could not meet his niece's eyes, his face a mask of humiliation. "What should we do with them?" a warrior asked. Lizzie looked at the prisoners, not with hatred, but with a weary sense of justice. "They do not belong to our world," she said. "They must face the laws of their own." The next day, a small party of warriors, led by Frenchy LeBeau, escorted the bound prisoners to the nearest cavalry outpost. They carried with them a detailed, written account from Lizzie, explaining the entire conspiracy, from Thorne's land grab to the illegal hiring of gunmen. The young lieutenant from Fort Ellis, seeing the evidence and the sheer number of captured outlaws, had no choice but to take them into custody. The law, which Thorne had once used as a weapon, had now become his cage. Marcus Kane was not sent with them. His crime was a personal betrayal, and his punishment was decided by Lizzie. He was given a single horse, a small amount of food and water, and was exiled from the Cheyenne lands forever. "I gave you my trust," she told him quietly, her voice devoid of emotion. "That is something you can never have again. Go, and never return." He rode away, a man with no family, no honor, and no future, a ghost destined to wander the frontier alone. Red Hawk recovered from his wound. His arm would carry a scar, a permanent reminder of his mistake and his redemption. He approached Lone Wolf and Cheyenne, laying his warrior's lance at their feet. "My path was crooked," he said. "Allow me to walk a straight one now. Let me be the boy's teacher, to show him the strength of our people, a strength I almost forgot." Lone Wolf accepted. The tribe, healed of its division, was now more united than ever. Months later, news reached them via Frenchy LeBeau. Jedediah Thorne and the leaders of his gang had been tried and sentenced. Their fate was sealed. Hard labor in the infamous territorial prison at Deer Lodge, a place from which few men returned. The threat was not just gone, it was permanently extinguished. The lands of the Cheyenne were secure, protected not by a treaty that could be broken, but by a reputation for wisdom and unyielding strength. That evening, Lone Wolf and Lizzie stood on the high bluff, watching the sunset paint the sky. The valley below was calm, the campfires twinkling like friendly stars. Their children, Cheyenne and his younger sister, were safe. The ghosts of the past had been faced and vanquished. Their long, arduous journey, which had begun with a desperate act of mercy in the desert, had reached its conclusion. They had weathered the storm and found their peace. "Do you ever regret it?" Lone Wolf asked softly, his voice full of the love and respect he held for her. "This life? The hardships?" Lizzie leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the familiar strength of his presence. She thought of her old life, a ghost of a memory. Then she looked at the vibrant, living world around her. "I did not choose a life of hardship," she said, her voice clear and sure. "I chose a life of meaning, and I would choose it again, every time." He took her hand, their fingers lacing together in a gesture of profound unity. They had faced betrayal from both their worlds and had forged something stronger in the fire. Their family, their people, their peace. It was all a testament to their resilience. Their legend, whispered on the winds of the Montana prairie, was not one of conquest or bloodshed. It was a story of how love, wisdom, and courage could build a lasting home in the very heart of the unforgiving West. And their future, like the vast, starlit sky above, was finally clear.